Hello guys, welcome to Professor DK, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how you can create a wonderful looking login app which takes in your password and your name and compares it to a string, and if it matches it lets you go to the next activity. And also, suppose you do 5 incorrect attempts, it also disables the button so that you can't log in. So let's start with it. So firstly, open Android Studio and we'll name this app as login demo and just click on next. Go with the defaults, click on next and choose empty activity, and let's just keep the name of the main activity as main activity and then proceed. So wait for Android Studio to build. Okay, so once your Android Studio has finished building, go ahead to the activity main, and here we are gonna click on the design tab. Okay, so under the design section we need to edit text and a button. So drag the plain text to the XML layout. So as you can see here, it has a main layout as well as the blueprint which is seen. So before we add the next edit text, we need to constrain this to the layout. So since I need it at the center, so constrain it horizontally to the right and left, and then also to the top and the bottom. So now that we have constrained this, we can move it slightly higher because we don't want it at the center. So there you have it, so it's perfectly aligned, and we don't want this text to be named, so just change this text, just keep it as a blank, and instead of text let's name the hint as name because that is much more better. And as you can see here, so you will have that name which will be highlighted unless the user clicks. So once the user clicks on this, it disappears. So that's a better way of defining a widget. And before we add that, we also need to set the ID of the text view. So if you scroll to the top, we can see that we have the ID of this edit text. So let's call this as et name and click on enter. So that's done. So next we need to add the edit text for the password. So just drag it below name, and we need to repeat the process again, but instead of constraining this to the top, we'll constrain this below this. Alright, so constrain this to that and to the bottom as well, and to the left and the right. So and then you can move it around. Okay, make sure it's in the center and place it right below the name. So there you have it, and we'll also set the hint and the ID for this edit text. So change the hint to password and change the ID which is at the top to et password. Et here basically means edit text for, so I'm writing a short for edit text as et password. So this is how I like coding it. So after this is done, we can add the button as well quickly. So add the button, drag it below the password, make sure it's in the center, constrain it again to the password, at the top constrain it to the bottom and horizontally as well. So once you have constrained it properly, you can move it around, and let's just quickly rename this button to login. Alright, and let's set the ID for the button as BTN, which is short for button, and login. Okay, so we have named the ID for the button as well. So now we also need to add a small text view. So under the button, add the text view. So this is basically to display the number of incorrect attempts. So let's change the text to number of incorrect attempts, colon and a space, and click enter, and you can see that it has moved. So make sure it's in the center. So now that we have done this, we can also assign the ID for this. So let's just call this TV info. Okay, so text view info, this is the ID for this, and we are not constrained this, so move to the blueprint, and so as we did earlier, so constrain it to the topmost layout and topmost widget, and also to the right and left, so then you can move it around. So there you have it. This is a simple login app which I have created in the latest Android Studio using the constraint layout. So this is as simple. So you can constraint layout might seem difficult at first, but this is as simple as it can get. So this is how you create the layout. So now that we have created our layout, we can go ahead to our main activity.java. So we need to create 4 variables for all the widgets that we created. So firstly, let's create the variable for edit text. I'll call this as name, and I'll call the other edit text as password, and we have a text view as well. I'll call this as info, and next we have a button, so let's call this as login. Alright, so now that we have added all our variables, we need to assign these variables to the ID defined in the XML layout. So for that we need to do a find view by ID. So take the variable, do a quick typecast to whatever the widget it is, and do a find view by ID. So what this does is it assigns this variable to the respective ID in the XML layout, and next we need to assign the password. So for that, again do a quick edit text typecast and find view by ID, and also r.id.et password. And once this is done, you can quickly do it for other two. I'm going to skip forward. Okay, so now that we have assigned our variables with the respective XML layout IDs, we need to write a function for validating if our password is right or wrong. So let's just write a function outside onCreate called as private void validate, and it will have 2 parameters. One is the user entered name and the user entered password. Okay, so this is how you can write a function, a simple function. So why void is because it's not returning anything. Okay, so it has to take the string and the password and then compare it with our string. So if we'll write a simple if condition, so if our username is equal to, you can write your name or whatever you want the username and password to be. So you can write admin, something like this, and you also want to make sure that this is, the user password is also equal to something. So user password is equal to 1234. So just make sure you put all of these in separate brackets, curly brackets. Okay, and now inside this, so what happens here is if the username is equal to admin and if the user password is equal to 1234, then you have to go to the next activity, which is it has to let the user enter into our app. So once the strings match, it has to let the user into the next activity. So for that we need the intent is equal to new intent. You need to go from main activity dot this to another activity. So let's call this second activity dot class. Alright, now this is showing an error because we have not created our second activity. So let's just quickly create our second activity. So click at the top left corner, you have your under Java, you can see your package name. So in that just right click and you can create your new activity. Just go to activity and create empty activity. So let's call this second activity for the sake of simplicity and click on finish. So that will create your second activity. Once the second activity has loaded, you can see that it has a Java file as well as the layout. But if you don't find these, you can always go ahead to the package and find the activity. And if you go to resources layout, you can find the layout here. So double click and you can get all this. So we'll just add a simple text view saying that this is the second activity. So just double click on this. You can change the text to this is second activity. Alright, so once you have done that, just click on enter and make sure it's in the center. So just drag it. Okay, it's in the center, and you can also change the text size a bit. So let's just gonna type text size, and Android Studio is gonna complete it for me. So just type in 32 scale independent pixels, which is XSP. So you can see that it's quite large now and much more visible. So this is our second activity. So let's just close this. We don't need this. We are not going to do anything much in the second activity. So there you can see our error has gone now. So basically an intent is used to move from one activity to another. It just uses these two parameters, the first activity and the activity which you want to go to, more like a source and a destination. So from main activity you need to add dot this, and a dot class is for the destination. Alright, so to start the next activity, we need to do a start activity function. So start activity, and the intent is passed as the parameter. So there you have it. That's how simple it gets. So this is how you can move to the next activity in just 2 lines. So this happens only when the username and the user password entered is equal to admin and 1234. Now, if it is not that, what happens? So basically we need to do something when the password is incorrect, right? So we'll just need a counter which decrements each time. So create a counter called private int. So since it's an integer, private int counter. So every time the wrong password is entered, the counter decrements. Okay, so let's initialize this counter to 5 because we want 5 attempts, and after 5 incorrect attempts the button should be disabled. Okay, so the counter decrements, and if the counter, so in the else you also need to do this. So if the counter is equal to 0, then you need to disable the button. So our button is basically the login. So login dot set enabled is false. So that's it, guys. So this will basically disable the button. Okay, so when should this function work? So this function should work only when the button login is clicked, right? So we need to set the on click listener for this. So login dot set on click listener. So make sure you type in how I'm typing, because I'm not typing everything. So I'm just typing a part of it. So if you can see, I'm just typing on click, and you can see that Android Studio is auto completing it for me. So once you just click enter, it writes a few codes by itself. Now if you just type new view dot, you're not gonna get this. Android Studio is not gonna understand what. So make sure you type in as I typed, new on click, and then click on enter, and you should get this. Okay, so inside on click it should validate. So I'm just gonna provide this function, and we also need to pass 2 parameters, which is username and user password. Now what is a username? So username is got from the edit text, right? So we need to do a name dot get text dot toString. Okay, so basically our name is the edit text, so it gets whatever the user has entered using the function get text, and then it is converted to a string, because as we have defined in the validate function, our username is a string. And we need to do the same for password as well. So get text and again to string. Okay, so there you have it guys. So this is our login app. So what it does is it firstly validates if our username and password is equal to admin and 1234, and if it is correct then it moves to the next activity. If it's not, then what happens is it decrements our counter, which is initialized to 5 initially, and after that it keeps decrementing, and if you keep plugging in incorrect passwords, and when the counter becomes 0, the login.set enabled becomes false. Okay, so now that we have completed this, we have another variable called info, which is the text view, which we need to use to display the number of incorrect attempts. So to display the incorrect attempts, what we need to do is, in the else, so info dot, make sure you type it properly, so info dot set text, and inside this let's just type number of attempts remaining, give a space, and we need to add the value of the counter. So it displays the number of attempts remaining, and the counter value, which keeps decrementing each time, is shown here. But since this is an int, we need to do a quick string dot value of, so just type string dot value of and some curly braces. Okay, so what this function does is it converts the int to a string. So this is how you can set the info of number of attempts remaining. Now, as you can recollect that we have named our this thing as number of incorrect attempts. I just changed it to number of attempts remaining. Make sure you do this change. And now if you run this app, you can see that it shows number of attempts remaining and there's a blank. So initially we can set this to info dot set text. Make sure you type it properly. So info dot set text, and number of attempts remaining is 5. Okay, so initially you can display this as info dot set text, number of attempts remaining as 5, and whenever the button is clicked, the validate function is called, and the number of attempts remaining keeps decrementing based on the value of the counter. So this is how you can create the login app. So it's that simple. So you can quickly go ahead and run this app onto your phone. So as you can see here, initially we have our number of attempts, which is equal to 5. So now next what we need to do is we need to enter the, so let's just do the correct versions first. So if you type in admin and then type 1234 and click on login, so you should be directed to the second activity. Now what if we type something which is wrong? So I'm just gonna type something wrong, and I'm just gonna click on login. So as you can see here, the number of attempts remaining is equal to 4 now. Okay, so if you just keep clicking on login, so it keeps decrementing, and after it reaches 0, you can see that the button gets disabled. So the button is now no longer available to be clicked. So if you try to click it, you can see that nothing happens. So this is a simple login app which you can use. You enter into an app, and this is solely for a single person who knows the username and password. So thank you guys for watching this. This was a simple demonstration of the login app. So thank you guys. If you like this video, make sure you give it a big thumbs up. This tutorial is for all those Android beginners out there who want to learn Android development. So by doing these simple projects, it helps you to learn Android better and faster. So thank you guys for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe.